Most people assume wealthy individuals avoid lifestyle upgrades because they are emotionally detached from luxury, naturally disciplined, or simply less interested in spending money, but the deeper reality is usually connected to how financial systems behave once a person becomes responsible for protecting assets instead of merely increasing income. The psychology of spending changes dramatically when someone realizes that every new luxury quietly creates a permanent financial obligation, and over time those obligations begin competing directly against flexibility, liquidity, and long-term control. At lower income levels, upgrades often feel motivating because they symbolize progress. A better apartment feels like evidence that years of work mattered. A more expensive car creates a visible marker of advancement. Nicer restaurants, premium subscriptions, upgraded technology, and constant convenience spending all produce the feeling of entering a higher tier of life. In moderation, none of these purchases are necessarily destructive. The issue emerges when lifestyle expansion becomes automatic rather than intentional, because modern economies are designed to normalize rising expenses faster than rising financial resilience. One of the strangest features of human psychology is that people adapt to improved living conditions extremely quickly. What once felt luxurious soon becomes emotionally invisible. A person who dreamed about business-class flights eventually experiences them as normal. A larger home stops feeling impressive after a few months. The upgraded lifestyle becomes the baseline, and the nervous system recalibrates around maintaining it rather than appreciating it. Economists sometimes describe this phenomenon as hedonic adaptation, but financially it creates a much larger structural problem. Expenses rarely move backward as easily as they moved upward. A person earning $60,000 per year might imagine that financial stress disappears at $200,000, yet many high earners discover something surprising after their income rises. Their stress often evolves instead of disappearing. The mortgage becomes larger. The social expectations become higher. The school tuition becomes recurring. Vacations become more expensive because their peer group quietly changes. Every lifestyle upgrade introduces a new fixed cost structure, and fixed cost structures reduce flexibility. This is where wealthy individuals often begin thinking differently than upper-middle-class consumers. Many financially sophisticated people do not evaluate purchases based on whether they can technically afford them today. They evaluate whether the purchase permanently increases the amount of monthly cash flow required to sustain their current identity. That distinction changes behavior dramatically. A luxury car is not merely a car. It is insurance, maintenance, depreciation, registration costs, parking expectations, and often an invisible social signal that pressures future spending decisions upward. A larger house is not merely extra space. It becomes property taxes, repairs, furnishing pressure, utility increases, landscaping, and years of ongoing attention. The visible price is usually only the entry point. The real cost is the future cash flow commitment attached to maintaining the upgrade indefinitely. This explains why some wealthy people appear surprisingly resistant to dramatic lifestyle expansion even when they could easily afford it multiple times over. They are often protecting optionality rather than maximizing visible consumption. Optionality is one of the most valuable financial assets in existence because it allows a person to respond to uncertainty without panic. When economic conditions shift unexpectedly, people with low fixed expenses can adapt faster. They can change careers more easily, survive market downturns longer, reject toxic opportunities, or temporarily earn less income without destabilizing their entire lives. People with highly inflated lifestyles lose much of that flexibility because their monthly financial obligations become too heavy to pause. This is why financial resilience and visible wealth are not always the same thing. A person earning enormous income while carrying massive recurring obligations may actually possess less financial freedom than someone earning far less but maintaining low structural expenses. The second person often controls more of their time, experiences less forced urgency, and can survive uncertainty with less emotional strain. There is also a deeper psychological layer underneath lifestyle restraint that rarely gets discussed openly. Once individuals accumulate meaningful wealth, they often become more aware of fragility. They begin understanding how quickly economic conditions can reverse. Entire industries disappear. Asset prices collapse. Tax structures change. Health emergencies occur. Recessions alter consumer behavior. Wealth preservation starts becoming less about maximizing status and more about reducing exposure to instability. Historically, this pattern appears repeatedly across generations. Families that maintain wealth for decades often develop cultures centered around preservation, liquidity, and controlled expansion rather than constant visible consumption. Meanwhile, newly wealthy groups sometimes experience rapid financial expansion followed by equally rapid contraction because spending scales faster than durable cash-producing assets. This difference becomes especially important when inflation quietly reshapes the economy. Inflation punishes people whose lifestyles require continuously rising income just to maintain stability. If every expense category expands simultaneously, individuals with high recurring obligations become increasingly dependent on uninterrupted earnings. Wealthy individuals who prioritize liquidity and manageable expenses often withstand inflationary environments more effectively because they retain decision-making flexibility. The mathematics behind this are deceptively simple. Imagine two individuals each earning the same high income. One spends nearly all of it maintaining an expensive lifestyle while the other preserves a large percentage as investable or liquid capital. Over time, the second individual gains increasing control over future decisions because capital begins generating additional income independently. The first individual remains dependent on continued labor regardless of how impressive their lifestyle appears externally. Eventually this creates an invisible divide between people who own financial systems and people who continuously feed them. This is also why many wealthy individuals become unusually focused on cash flow rather than appearances. Cash flow represents survival capacity during uncertainty. It represents time. It represents negotiation power. It represents the ability to endure mistakes without immediate collapse. A person with strong cash flow and low obligations can survive conditions that destroy individuals who appear richer on the surface. Modern consumer culture rarely encourages this type of thinking because economies benefit when people continuously expand spending habits. Advertising systems are built around identity reinforcement. People are taught to associate upgrades with self-worth, success, and social validation. The danger is not luxury itself. The danger is unconsciously building a life that requires permanent financial acceleration just to remain emotionally stable. Over time, many wealthy individuals stop asking whether they can buy something and start asking what the purchase will quietly require from them 5 years later. Will it increase dependence on future income? Will it reduce flexibility? Will it create new obligations? Will it lock them into a higher burn rate that becomes psychologically difficult to reverse? That shift in thinking is subtle, but it changes almost everything. Ultimately, many wealthy people avoid excessive lifestyle upgrades not because they dislike comfort or luxury, but because they understand that every recurring expense competes against freedom in ways that are often invisible at first. Financial independence is rarely destroyed by one catastrophic decision. More often it erodes slowly through layers of normalized obligations that quietly transform income into maintenance. And once a person begins seeing lifestyle through the lens of cash flow, optionality, and long-term control, restraint stops feeling like deprivation and starts feeling like protection.